As you see there, that was Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer speaking just a few moments ago there on the Senate floor, mostly focusing his remarks on the death of Alex Preddy, which happened in Minnesota over the weekend, but also taking time to talk about what's on the agenda there on Capitol Hill. He mentioned that the government shutdown is impending if they're not able to have a funding bill that is passed, but ultimately the Department of Homeland Security, that portion is one that he says that Democrats on the Hill are not willing to budge on. And so to talk a lot more about what we're seeing, I want to bring in congressional reporter with the Deseret, Cami Mondeaux. Cami, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you.
Well, those were words there that we finally heard from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, being very clear, drawing a line in the sand, seemingly saying that Democrats are not going to vote for this funding bill as is, as long as it includes what is going to be the funding for the Department of Homeland Security. That is, in part, funding these ICE operations happening across the country. So what else is your initial kind of response to that? What are you hearing from other Democrats? Is the speaker, or it should say, is the minority leader head on as it pertains to that?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing is a complete turnaround to what we saw even just last week when the House passed this funding bill. We had a lot of Senate Democrats who said this isn't the best deal that we can get, but it's what we can get. You know, being in the minority, there's not a lot of power that they have, but this is the best option that they could negotiate. But after that shooting we saw over the weekend, you're seeing Democrats who even helped negotiate this package, including Senator Patty Murray, who's the top Democrat appropriator. She's now a no on that package. You're seeing Schumer, who's a no. Every single Democrat who has so far said something about this package says they are a no, except for Senator Fetterman, who says he's against funding ICE and DHS, but he does not want to shut down. And so he's the lone defector in the Democratic Party on that side. But right now we are seeing a big coalition on the Democratic side.
And so, Cami, I appreciate you for breaking that down. And let's just kind of even skip from what the Democrats are now saying, jumping over to the Republican response to this. Over the weekend, since that latest shooting that happened in Minnesota, many Republicans have been outspoken on social media, some in the House side saying that they would not have voted on this initial bill had they seen if they could forecast what was going to happen in Minnesota over the weekend with Alex Preddy. Are you hearing similar things in the Senate as this is moving towards that goal line?
The main thing you're hearing from Senate Republicans is not necessarily that they want to pull out this DHS funding, at least not yet. A lot of them do want investigations and they do want to look into this shooting. They want to look into the oversight of these immigration officers. But so far what we're seeing, especially from leadership and individual senators, is they don't want to risk a shutdown over this. They want to make sure that the remainder of DHS is funded. You know, ICE is only a small portion of that budget that would be passed, but we still have TSA and other Homeland Security agencies that need to be funded under this bill. So as of right now, you're not seeing a lot of Republican appetite to either pull it out or just leave it out completely. So that's kind of the dynamic that we're working with right now.
And so as we're still continuing to watch, I want to put up this live vantage point that we have right now as President Trump is there in Iowa. He's going to be making a speech on the economy, but we just heard some remarks there while he was inside of that restaurant. The camera was a lot closer at this time. It does appear that he's now just sort of mixing and mingling with some of the diners there at this restaurant. But the president himself has been outspoken now about this shooting. In fact, as he was leaving the White House, he said this, quote, "I want to see the investigation. I'm going to be watching over it. And I want a very honorable and honest investigation. I have to see it myself." I just wanted to know if you thought that some of his words as he's speaking there on the shooting death of Alex Preddy, whether or not that can sort of influence those in Congress to vote yes or no ultimately on the funding bill.
I think Trump definitely will have a big stake in this if he does somehow come out and say that maybe we should rework or look at the DHS funding again. You will see Republicans fall in line that way. So far, the Trump administration has had kind of a back and forth on their reaction here. We saw, Christina Noem and other administration officials at first want to blame Alex Preddy for the situation. Then we saw Trump come out to speak to Governor Walz and Mayor Frey. Since then, the administration has kind of calmed things a little bit. They've pulled some officers out of Minnesota. That's when Republicans started coming out saying they wanted an investigation. I think Trump definitely kind of holds the cards here that if he says we should look at funding in a different way, Republicans would probably fall in line on that.
All right. And so it's not only there from President Trump that we're hearing some of these lawmakers respond. I want to put this up on the screen for folks at home as well. This is from Hakeem Jeffries. Of course, he is the House Minority Leader. And he put this out on his social media today, saying Donald Trump must fire Christina Noem immediately, or Democrats will initiate impeachment proceedings against her in the House. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Of course, all of this coming as the Senate is getting ready to vote on the DHS funding bill. It is interesting timing, all of this coming also on the back of the shooting of Alex Preddy. We also know that just a few minutes ago that Democratic U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, where Alex Preddy grew up and graduated high school from, also spoke out, saying that she supports impeaching Secretary Christina Noem as well. Do we think that this is going to be able to have any legs? We, of course, know that the House is dominated by Republicans, so is the Senate side. Is this something that could even potentially start to be something that's a conversation about there on Capitol Hill?
This could start a snowball movement toward that. We do know that Christina Noem is supposed to be testifying before Congress sometime in March. And so getting this kind of rolling ahead of time could either lead up to that, or depending on how that testimony goes, that could be, the moment that Republicans start to wonder, they only need a couple of them, especially in the House, to say, yes, let's do this. Maybe that could be the moment for this. But as of right now, it is a big shift for Democratic leaders to even get behind this. They've been very wary of wanting to do any kind of impeachment proceedings against any administration official. They do that because they have, such a long shot chance to do that. They've been really hesitant because they don't want those to fail, because that gives a messaging opportunity for Republicans. So the fact that Democratic leadership has shifted so much, that could get the ball rolling on maybe some sort of action.
And so we do know that Baldwin also said that she would not vote for the DHS funding bill before the Senate without additional accountability measures for U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. And so, Cami, as we're sort of rounding out here, we've been speaking about it. In general, this funding bill is a small portion of the larger package, which is going to ultimately prevent a government shutdown if it is voted on by the end of the month. I would just like for folks at home to get a better understanding of really what we're facing as we get closer and closer to that deadline.
Absolutely. As you said, this is just a small portion of one bill that's in the 6-bill package. And so this really is like a big issue, obviously, and it's a big conversation talking point, but it is such a small portion of what this package is. We also still have like the Labor Department, the Health and Human Services Department, several other federal agencies that still need their budget approved for the 2026 fiscal year. That will grind to a halt if this package doesn't make it through on Friday. Of course, they're still talking through conversations about what they could do. Democrats really want to pull the DHS portion out of the package, but that would require the House to come back and pass it again. House leaders are not planning on doing that as of right now. And so we are looking at a very high likelihood that half of the government could shut down by the end of this week, which will affect much more than just Homeland Security operations.
Well, we'll certainly continue to keep following this story here on Live Now from Fox. And as always, we appreciate there with the Deseret, Cami Mondeaux, for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. Thanks so much, Cami.
Thank you.
All right, wanted to make sure we were able to give you that update. I also want to put this up on the screen for you as well. This is from Senator Rand Paul, putting this on his X account, saying DHS funding should be viewed in the context of our current $2 trillion deficit. The 2026 spending bill gives DHS $92 billion for this year. Last year, Congress gave DHS an additional $165 billion in advance funding. So even if DHS appropriations were eliminated this year, DHS would still be funded at roughly 180% of their regular level.